The British Loyalty, 1927 to 1946. The British Loyalty was a motor tanker of the British Advocate class of vessels, built by Palmers and Company Limited of Newcastle on Tyne. She was launched on the 26th of September 1927. Some 11 years later, at the start of World War II, in September 1939, she was enlisted as a Ministry of War transport vessel. The British Loyalty had quite a checkered career during World War II. She was used to transport fuel to ships and ports throughout the world to support the war effort. There are at least another 55 registered vessels, starting with British, listed at this time. The British Loyalty's fate at the end of the war is well known. As on the 15th of January 1946, she was towed to a point away from the main shipping channels, just southeast of Hitchadu Island in the Adu Atoll Lagoon, and scuttled. There are also reports that many fish and dolphins in the lagoon were killed by oil pollution after the scuttling, and that oil continued to leak from the wreck at a diminished rate and came ashore in the lagoon over the following 10 years. Oil traces are still visible on the surface above the wreck today. It was not long after her enlistment into the war effort that the British Loyalty was involved in an incident with the enemy. This attack occurred at 10:20 hours on the 3rd of February 1940, just 12 miles east of the Arbroath in the North Sea off Scotland. It came from a German Heinkel bomber aircraft, whose crew dropped 6 bombs, 5 very close to the ship. The aircraft attacked British Loyalty no less than 5 times, each time strafing the ship with machine gun bullets. During one of the attacks, the main steam pipe to the port boiler was penetrated because the boiler house storm plates were open at the time. It is this fact that creates a bit of a dilemma, as the designation of MV in the ship's name implies that the British Loyalty was powered by a diesel engine, whereas this description of the attack mentions the main steam pipe being damaged by machine gun bullets. The MV designation is further confounded by what we found in the engine room, as the diesel engine found in the engine room looked very much like a 3-cylinder steam engine of a similar design to that of the SS Thorfinn, an ex-Norwegian steam-driven wheeler now used as a luxury dive boat in the Pacific. The SS Thorfinn's working engine is a joy to behold. What is even more confusing is that the engine is missing one of its pistons and the associated connecting rod. 3 British fighter planes soon arrived and drove off the bomber. In spite of the prolonged attack, the crew of the British Loyalty suffered no casualties, and damage to the boat was limited to just a small number of bullet holes in the superstructure and the steam pipe in the engine room. Although she had been severely shaken by the falling bombs, there was no apparent structural damage to the vessel. The British Loyalty's master, R. Wastell, submitted his report of the attack to the ship's owners on the 4th of February 1940. Prior to her scuttling, she had the distinction of being torpedoed twice, once by a Japanese midget submarine I-20 in 1942, and the second time by a German submarine, the U-183, in 1944. It was the beginning of May 1942 that the Allied forces had finally landed in Madagascar. British Loyalty had arrived at the port on the 19th of May from Trincomalee via the Seychelles and had spent most of her time bunkering a number of HM ships. Signalman Harry Barnett was watching from the deck of HMS Ramillies and was horrified to see the track of a torpedo, which appeared to be heading directly towards the ship. As he looked out, he could see British Loyalty, just underway, going astern and directly into the torpedo's path. It was now 21:20 hours, and the tanker was hit in the after part of the engine room and caught the full blast of the weapon that had been intended for the battleship. The stern of British Loyalty began to sink rapidly, and her master Arwostel gave the order to abandon ship. One of the most heroic acts to occur that night on board the rapidly sinking British Loyalty was made by Second Officer Main. He had been standing on the gun platform when the torpedo hit the ship. He was blown to the next deck by the force of the explosion. The gun was demolished, and Officer Main jumped into one of the boats. He returned to the ship to see if anyone else needed help and found the chief engineer unconscious outside the lower engine room door. He then proceeded to carry him to the waiting boat. Most of the Indian crew and officers of the Loyalty escaped in the boats, but no one emerged from the wrecked engine room, and 5 men were missing, believed killed. In the meantime, the British Loyalty had sunk to the bottom of the harbour in around 23 metres of water, with only part of her funnel visible above the surface. Investigations by naval authorities as to the state of the British Loyalty suggested that she was in fact salvable. In December 1942, they raised the ship and work continued to make her a serviceable vessel once more. On the 7th of October 1943, she left Diego Suarez for the Maldives and the Ado Atoll Lagoon, where she was to be used as a fuel storage hulk. What is not clear from all the information available is how the British Loyalty reached the Maldives. Whether she arrived there under her own power or was towed there is not clear. Her second torpedo attack occurred on the 9th of March 1944, which therefore suggests that it was not until 1944, after the attack, that she was officially declared a hulk. The Loyalty lies at longitude 73 degrees 07 minutes east of Greenwich, latitude 0 degrees 38 minutes south of the equator. Her position is recorded on Admiralty Chart 2067. The ship, which was some 134.3 metres long, with a beam of 17.4 metres, now rests on her starboard side and is pointing north. She lies at the bottom of the lagoon in around 33 metres of water. The wreck is easily accessible from the main centre on Ado Atoll, being about a 30-minute donie ride from Equator Village on Gad. The propeller is at 23 metres and covered in a big bushy black coral tree. The topmost propeller blade is missing, revealing a fracture surface. The survey of the wreck was conducted in two main phases. The first, an orientation phase, was used to gain an appreciation of the scale of the task and was conducted concurrently with sports diver depth experience build-ups. This phase included setting out marker tags from which measurements could be taken and photographs and video could be orientated. On the second phase, measurements and descriptive work was carried out using the marker tags as datum points. The ship is now heavily encrusted with both hard and soft corals. Many fish have made their home in the wreck, and large turtles often swim around her deck. Much of the deck railing still exists, and most main parts of the vessel are still recognisable, although silt and coral are reshaping the wreck and filling the larger cavities. This wreck is a must for all visiting scuba divers to the Adu Atoll. The vessel still has its spare propeller stowed on deck just forward of the engine room cavity. In front of the engine room are two large holes. These holes are so big that divers can easily swim through them into the ship's interior. The interior is easy to penetrate, but is not for the novice diver because of its depth. But competent sports divers can gain safe wreck penetration skills on this wreck in good visibility. However, there are some confined swim-throughs that may be beyond the sports diver and should only be attempted in good visibility and with a competent buddy. The hole made when the German submarine U-183 on the 9th of March 1944 was on the starboard side of the vessel and is not visible. Survey teams used whiteboard slates and 30-metre builders measuring tapes to gather and record relevant information. At the end of each dive, the measurements taken by the two-man diver teams were transposed onto a large line drawing of the wreck, and new tasks allocated at the briefing for the next survey dive.
So that's the thing we got there. Yeah, that was it. She started off the deck, just slope down onto the deck. And those two, the upper two are more like white lines.
Did you see this hatch? Well, what was a hatch cover?
Yeah, that's definitely
Was that
far end of
was it just under the hatch? Or across the hatch?
They ended before it, so I've put that hatch further over towards this end.
I know it's up from I'm not sure the angle, but this is further back than that, so yeah, it could possibly a little bit further. So we'll need to measure from point 1 across to the railing that surrounds it. So that. Okay, so we'll put 2 lines in there to suggest.
By the time they finish before we get to that check.
The bridge is only recognisable to the experienced diver as the structure has largely collapsed and is laying in a jumble on the seabed, midships at 33 metres. Towards the end of the survey phase, the more experienced divers introduced newly qualified sports divers to know clear surface diving and wreck penetration techniques. The main penetration opportunities on this wreck are limited to the main engine room and the torpedo damage hull, along with a passage swim-through running through the shallow area of the base of the bridge. Oil pipes and hawsers crisscross the main deck areas, creating an interesting series of overhangs and open swim-throughs. But there are potential hazards for the unwary if basic no-clear surface precautions are ignored. The expedition carried out a total of 137 man dives on the wreck, totaling 4,802 minutes of dive time. In addition to the manual recording of data, some 180 minutes of video and approximately 100 photographs were taken. The wreck survey task was conducted in a professional, disciplined and safe manner. It resulted in a great deal of information about the wreck being gathered, which will benefit all future divers on this site. In addition, newly qualified divers were exposed to the requirements of working underwater at depth to an agreed plan as part of a coordinated survey team. The experience gained here by all the team members will serve them well in future diving tasks.